So starting off, we're going to jump into some identification and anatomy of scorpions, just in general. Scorpions are arachnids. They're not insects. They are really closely related to spiders, mites, and ticks, anything else in that arachnid class. So they do share a lot of characteristics with other arachnids. The main defining characteristic would be these two body segments, the cephalothorax and the opistosoma. So the cephalothorax of the scorpion is going to be that head region that contains the eyes. So you can see the eye pair that's in this picture. On the back of its head, it does have one pair of eyes. And then scorpions also have an additional pair of eyes, two actually, on each side of their head. And that, when I say pair, could be anything from 2 to 5 additional eyes on each side, depending on the species of scorpion. And then in the opistosoma, this is divided into two kind of subcategories of the body. We have the mesosoma, which is going to be this oval-shaped, elongated, segmented region with the 7 segments you can see in the picture. This has the walking legs that are another characteristic shared with the arachnids. All arachnids are going to have 4 pairs of jointed walking legs, but something that is kind of unique to scorpions is that they do have a tarsal claw at the end of their legs. So that's going to be this tiny little hook, kind of like a claw at the end of their leg that allows scorpions to climb. And especially in the bark scorpion, this allows them to climb vertically up walls and those straight up bark surfaces, a tree trunk perhaps, just a surface like that. And then the metosoma is what we consider the tail of the scorpion. So this isn't really a tail like you would find in a vertebrate species. It's not really an extension of the spine, obviously, because scorpions don't have a skeleton, they have the exoskeleton. It's going to start off closest to the body, is going to be the shortest segment of the tail, and then moving further away from the body, the segments get increasingly longer. At the end of the tail is going to be the telson, which is that little barb that you see. This contains the venom glands. And then the aculeus is what we call the stinger, and that's where the venom is released into prey or a predator, I guess, something that's trying to harm the scorpion. Scorpions also share the common characteristic of chelicerae, which are the moving mandible jaw parts of the scorpion, the parts that allow it to eat prey. And they also have pedipalps and chelae. So like other arachnids, such as spiders, they do have pedipalps. But something that's kind of unique to scorpions is that theirs are extremely specialized. So they have these pedipalps with chelae at the end, which are the pinchers. And these are going to allow scorpions to be able to grasp their prey and eat it. And so a lot of scorpions actually hunt just by grabbing their prey. If they're able to, they like to conserve venom when possible because venom is extremely energetically taxing to produce. But we'll touch on that a little bit later. So within the order Scorpiones, there are nearly 2,000 species. So scorpions have been around for a very long period of time. There's a lot of different species. And actually out of these 2,000 species, there's actually only about 25 that are considered medically important. And when I say medically important, that just means that these scorpions have venom that is strong enough to potentially be lethal and has in certain cases. May require hospitalization if you're stung, depending on the species. And so a couple of distinguishing features of the scorpions, again, like I was saying before, the specialized pedipalps as well as the stinging tail. So venom definitely isn't specific to scorpions. Other arachnids have venom as well, but scorpions are able to administer their venom to a potential predator or a prey item with their stinging tail, with their telson and the aculeus. And so scorpions have a different neurotoxic venom in each species. So what this means is that a scorpion can be identified from a different species based on the type of neurotoxin that's found in its venom. And just kind of a little fun fact here, the Arizona bark scorpion, which is the most common scorpion found in Arizona in urban areas, was thought to be the same species as the Baja California bark scorpion for a long time. But what finally distinguished the two from each other, they do look very similar to one another. What finally distinguished them was that they found the Baja California bark scorpion has a weaker neurotoxin in its venom, and isn't going to be nearly as deadly as the Arizona bark scorpion. And so one final thing that's really unique to scorpions among other invertebrates, other arthropods, even within arachnids themselves, are that scorpions have viviparity and maternal care. And so what this means, the viviparity, means that scorpions give birth to live young. They actually don't lay eggs. They don't have an egg sac in the way that you would imagine from another arachnid. They do give birth to live scorpion babies. They're called scorplings. And they also provide maternal care, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. We'll come back to that point, but these are just some unique defining characteristics of scorpions. All right, and so now I'm going to go into a little bit of identification among a few different scorpion species in the United States desert. These ones are specifically found in Arizona. The first two that I'm going to cover aren't necessarily a pest that you would find in a common household, but they are members of the Arizona desert, and they are important to be able to distinguish these ones from the more harmful Arizona bark scorpion. So this one is the giant desert hairy scorpion. It's the largest in North America. It can grow up to about 5.5 inches in length. They can get pretty big, especially compared to some of the other smaller desert species. It gets its name from these hairs on its legs, tail, and pedipalps that are used to detect vibrations in the soil and air. So these aren't necessarily unique to the desert hairy scorpion. All other scorpions are going to have these microscopic fibers, these little hairs on their legs and pedipalps. But the desert hairy, and I wish I had a better picture to show you, I'm so sorry, it's a little difficult to see, but they do have these really defined hairs on their pedipalps that makes them look hairy. They also have a relatively weak venom. So this is just kind of a general rule among scorpions, not a hard law that is true of all scorpions, but generally, when you see a scorpion like this that has these bigger pedipalps, these bigger pinchers, the chelae, that scorpion is typically going to be less venomous than a scorpion with smaller pedipalps. And this is something that I've kind of heard growing up. I'm sure a lot of you have too, that a smaller scorpion is more venomous than a bigger scorpion. So when you find a scorpion in your home, you might say, oh, it's a baby, it's going to be a lot more powerful than an adult. But that's not necessarily true among individuals of their own species. It's more true among just all the species in general. If you compare a small scorpion to a big scorpion, typically the smaller one is going to have a stronger venom. And there's a reason for this. We'll touch on it a little bit later. So next is the striped-tailed scorpion. This is a medium-sized scorpion. It's about the same size as the Arizona bark scorpion. It's going to be about 2.5 to 3 inches in length as an adult. And just like the other one we just saw, the giant desert hairy, it has this light brown, yellowish tan color that a lot of desert scorpion species have. This is really just to help it camouflage with its environment. Having that light sandy color helps it blend into the desert soil and protects it from predators, also helps it sneak up on prey a little bit. So some defining characteristics of this species are its thick tail. So compared to the next one we're going to talk about, the Arizona bark scorpion, this one has a very thick tail segment. It has thicker pedipalps. So again, going back to that point of the weaker venom, these ones aren't going to be as dangerous as some other species. This one has vertical stripes in its tail, which is where it gets its name, that can also help distinguish the scorpion from other species. And again, this one is venomous, but not necessarily medically significant. So if you were to be stung by a scorpion of the species, it may be comparable to, say, a wasp sting or a bee sting, but it wouldn't necessarily require hospitalization, unless you're allergic. All right, and so the third species that we're going to talk about, and actually the one that we're going to keep revisiting through this full presentation, the star of the show, is the Arizona bark scorpion. And this is because this is like I said, the most common scorpion species. It's found in Arizona urban environments, so around Phoenix, around this area. And not only that, but it is the most venomous scorpion in North America. So this is actually one of the 25 that I mentioned earlier that is medically significant, medically important, which means, again, the scorpion can cause hospitalization, can potentially be lethal if certain people are stung. Usually younger children are the ones that are most vulnerable, but it can cause lethality. And so this is going to be a light brown tan scorpion, again, just like every other desert scorpion species is going to be about this color, 2 to 3 inches in length. And really quickly, just going into a side-by-side comparison of all three species that I just touched on, you can see the Arizona bark scorpion compared to these other two. If you take a really close look at the pedipalps, the pinchers at the end of its pedipalps, You can see that in the Arizona bark scorpion, these are a lot thinner and a lot smaller. So you can see the rounded, large pinchers in the other two species. That's going to be one helpful defining characteristic when you go to look for these. They also have a very long, thin tail, which is good for whipping and stinging its victims, its prey. Whereas in these other two, their tails are a little bit thicker and not quite as long relative to the body. And again, these other two species, the striped tail and the giant desert hairy, aren't necessarily going to be common household pests that you find in Arizona. They do tend to live more out in just the wild environment, in the desert, but it is important to be able to identify your target pest and be able to tell the difference between the Arizona bark versus any other scorpion species in the desert in Arizona. All right, so we're going to jump into the life cycle of the scorpion and talk about their reproduction for a little bit. Sexual reproduction does occur in most species. However, there are a couple of exceptions that are kind of cool. So some scorpion species can reproduce via parthenogenesis, which just means that a female can produce her own young without sperm from a male. So when these babies are born, they're going to be an identical genetic clone to the mother since it's her own DNA, but that's still going to help her when males aren't readily available to release her DNA into the scorpion population. So in most species, however, sexual reproduction does occur, and it starts with courtship from the male. So a male will approach a female, and scorpions actually have these really weird-looking organs on their underside, on their ventral side, called pectines that look like these weird feathery combs. And what they're used for is chemical sensing. So males can use these pectines and kind of sweep all over the substrate, pick up pheromones from a female, and then track her down and locate a receptive female. And so when they're ready to mate, the male will grab onto the female's claws, her pinchers, her chelae, hold onto her, and then they just kind of engage in this mating dance, which can last from anywhere from an hour up to a couple of hours. They'll just be kind of walking around the substrate. And what he's doing is dragging her and guiding her and trying to find a suitable place to deposit something called a spermatophore. And that's going to be a package of sperm that is used in this external sort of deposit that he deposits on the substrate and then guides her over using his claws. He'll drag her over to it so that she can pick it up and her eggs will be fertilized. And again, when I say eggs, this doesn't mean eggs like you would expect another insect to lay. This is going to be internally fertilized eggs that the female will carry until they're ready to be born. And so that gestation period can last for up to a year in certain species. In the bark scorpion, this is going to be closer to around 9 months. So similar to humans, actually. They're pregnant for about the same time as us. And on average, about 25 to 35 babies are going to be born. These are called scorplings. And something that is really unique to scorpions is maternal care. So again, this isn't going to be something like maternal care that a human mother would provide to a child. It's not individualized. It's what it looks like is a mother scorpion carrying all of her scorplings on her back. So there's a reason for this too. I know that 25 to 35 kids might sound like kind of a lot, but among arthropods, among other arachnids, this is actually a pretty small number. So think of like a spider that can lay, hundreds of eggs at a time that all hatch. These spiders are able to disperse into the environment, and the mother spider doesn't have to spend any additional attention raising her kids or making sure that they survive to adulthood. And that's because there's power in the numbers there. So having that many kids ensures that at least some of them are going to survive and grow up and become adults and put your DNA into the population. Whereas with scorpions, there's an energetic trade-off here. So a scorpion is going to spend more time and attention making sure that that small number of babies that she spent 9 whole months carrying and producing are going to survive past their juvenile stage. So when the scorplings are born, the mother creates kind of like a birth basket, it's called. She'll kind of weave her legs together and boost the babies up onto her back, where she's going to carry them for the next 1 week to 3 weeks, just until those babies are old enough to molt for the first time. And after they molt, they're going to be a lot less vulnerable. So when they're born, they have very fragile exoskeletons. They're not fully hardened yet, and the babies are very vulnerable just to the environment. So having them on her back ensures that the mother has viable children that make it to adulthood. And so I'm going to show just a really quick video. This is actually one of my scorpions from my lab at 95 Applications. This is one that just gave birth. She is helping her babies climb up onto her back, her scorplings. And this is one that made it up onto her exoskeleton. So you can really see they're born kind of pale, pigmentless. They really stand out in the environment. They're not going to have that dark brown sandy coloration yet. And they're going to climb up onto her back and hang on there until they're old enough to molt for the first time. So eventually all 30 of these are going to climb up onto her back and just kind of pile on like that picture I just showed you, and hang on there for a couple of weeks. All right, so we're going to touch on the behavior of the scorpion for a little bit. So most scorpions are considered non-social, which means that their only interactions are going to be during mating and, like I just described, the maternal care. There's some exceptions to this. So in the Arizona bark scorpion that we keep coming back to, they actually overwinter together. So in groups of about 20-30 scorpions, they'll be found in the same crevice, kind of hibernating in a sense. They will slow down their metabolism and wait out this colder season until they feel warm enough to go out and hunt again and survive and just kind of resume their normal lives. Most scorpions are nocturnal, most species. There are a couple that are crepuscular, meaning that they're active at dawn and dusk, but most are nocturnal and most hunt at night. So despite having so many pairs of eyes, scorpions actually have really poor vision, but they do hunt at night using their other senses. So like I was talking about before with the desert hairy scorpion, they have little hairs on their legs that can help them sense movement and sound, and that actually makes them pretty good hunters. They're able to hunt at night. They don't need to be able to see very well in the dark. They can rely on these other senses to find food. And so now we'll jump into hunting and feeding in scorpions. So all scorpions are predators. They're going to actively look for prey. There are a couple species that build burrows and will kind of just sit and wait for a prey to walk by, but they're still going to be actively hunting them. Their diet consists of smaller invertebrates, so they're really opportunistic when it comes to their diet. They will hunt for anything that's smaller than them, anything that can be subdued with their stingers or their chelae. They're mainly going to prey on things like crickets, smaller spiders, roaches, beetles, and even some of the bigger species like the desert hairy that we talked about is going to sometimes even prey on small vertebrate animals. So it's been known to catch tiny lizards, small rodents, stuff like that. Anything that it is able to subdue, it can and will. The prey is caught with the chelae and subdued with the stinger. So like in this picture you can see, generally the scorpion will first strike by grabbing it with its pinchers and then administering a sting of venom. The chelicerae are used to pull off small pieces of the prey item. So once it's caught its prey and it's ready to eat, it does so by ripping off these tiny pieces of the prey that it's just caught and then ejecting a digestive juice to liquefy the prey. And the reason for this is because scorpion digestive systems are actually only able to digest liquid. They wouldn't be able to really just like chew up this cricket and eat it whole. They have to liquefy it first before it's sucked into the gut and processed for further digestion. Here's another video that was taken from my lab. This is a scorpion that you can see just caught a cricket, and it has already stung it once at this point, but right now he's just kind of finding a suitable place to eat. My scorpions are kept in a community tank, and so they do get a little bit aggressive when I feed them. You can see that he's stung this cricket and is going to start eating in a minute, but you'll see here in just a second this cricket starts kind of twitching and thrashing, so it's not completely paralyzed by the venom yet, and this requires a scorpion to administer another sting, as you can see, and then you'll actually be able to see the exact point where the cricket stops moving and the neurotoxins in its venom take effect and paralyze the cricket. And so then it's able to use these chelicerae, the chewing mouth part, to chew up the cricket and eject the digestive juices to liquefy it. All right, so on the topic of envenomation, scorpions only tend to sting when they feel threatened or endangered. And most scorpion stings actually only occur when the scorpion feels like it's about to be squished. So if it happens to be trapped in clothing or in a towel or something, maybe on the underside of an object that you go to pick up, when the scorpion feels like you're about to hurt it, that's when it's going to sting and defend itself. Their venom, like I said before, is a neurotoxin that varies in potency among the species. So one scorpion is not going to have the exact same neurotoxin as a different species. And that potency does vary widely between species. So like I was saying, those 25 out of the nearly 2,000 are going to be medically significant and have very toxic lethal venom. The venom, however, is energetically taxing to produce and release, meaning that scorpions are going to conserve their venom when possible. So when they're hunting, they're not going to necessarily use their sting as a first defense. Maybe if they're grabbing a smaller prey item, they'll be able to just use their claws or their pinchers to grab the prey and eat it without having to subdue it or administering just a very small amount of venom. The amount of venom that a scorpion releases can actually be controlled. So for a smaller prey item, they might only use a very small amount of venom so that they can conserve this energy that it takes to produce it. All right, so now we'll jump into the habitat of the scorpion. Most people really think of scorpions as more of a desert animal. They are in fact found on every continent except Antarctica, so they're not strictly inhabited in the desert. They are generally a desert species. They are found in desert environments generally, but they are found also in, certain species are found in deciduous forests, as well as grasslands, wherever they can successfully survive. Some species do dig burrows, like we were talking about the giant desert hairy. Will dig a burrow and use that to prey on insects that are walking by. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to live in these burrows full time. Most scorpions choose to inhabit crevices or really just small areas within an environment that it feels safe, feels like it's going to be protected from predators, and is able to hunt. So going back to the Arizona bark scorpion, again, we're going to be talking mostly about this species because it is the most venomous and the most medically significant. Its range is anywhere from Southern California through New Mexico, so all the way through the state of Arizona, and also in adjacent regions of Mexico. It does have a preference for riparian habitats, so near water sources where it's going to be able to find sources of water. It's attracted to moisture in tree groves, so especially around here in Phoenix where we have a lot of citrus tree groves, those are really attractive to the Arizona bark scorpion. So anywhere that it's going to be able to find water, it's going to live. And so the water also means that prey is going to be abundant. So if a scorpion can survive there, and if its prey species can survive there, it's going to thrive in these environments. And that's why so many species are, so many scorpions are found in the urban environments near Phoenix. The Arizona bark scorpion is actually one of the very few species that can completely climb vertically. So scorpions can climb in general, but the bark scorpion is very specialized to be able to climb vertically. So climbing up walls and hanging upside down, even on ceilings and on the underside of any kind of harborage site that it can find. And so the urban habitats, like I was saying, they're really attracted to these urban environments in Phoenix because it has a lot of homes, a lot of places that the scorpion is going to be able to take shelter and feel safe, as well as that attraction to the moisture in the environment from citrus groves and from urban lawns. Things like people make a very attractive environment for a scorpion. And so they seek shelter in cinder block walls, which are what most backyard fences are made up of in the urban Phoenix environment. If you look inside the walls at night, you can go out with a black light and shine the light and actually see it kind of just light up with scorpions. I've done it. They're going to look for shelter in things like stacked wood and debris piles that they might find near people's homes. Leaf litter, if you have piles of leaves around your homes that haven't been raked up yet, scorpions are attracted to those as well because they're going to be very nice, moist, cool, hydrated environments for the scorpions to be able to live. And then inside homes. So scorpions are very sensitive to water loss. They prefer cooler environments to try to conserve water. Obviously, as a desert species, they do try to conserve water and lower their temperature whenever possible. They have an exoskeleton that prevents water loss, but they will prefer to seek shelter in places that are cooler and places that are going to provide them with water, such as irrigated lawns and places that attract abundant prey. So if you have another pest species in your home, possibly like crickets or something that would be really attractive to a scorpion, you may also have a scorpion problem. All right, so last I'm going to touch on human significance for now, and then we'll jump into some control methods in a little bit. But human significance of the Arizona bark scorpion is it generally affects mostly vulnerable people. So when I say vulnerable, I mean children who are going to be the most at risk when they're stung for these severe symptoms. Again, the Arizona bark scorpion is the only scorpion of medical significance in Arizona and is the most venomous in North America. And once again, they only sting really when they feel threatened. They're not going to seek out a person and try to sting them because this venom is very energetically taxing to produce. They do sting people to defend themselves when they feel threatened, when they're trapped against skin. So again, inside clothing, if you step on them barefoot, if you go to pick something up that has a scorpion on the underside, these are when most stings happen. All right, so I'm going to talk really quick about some sting symptoms. If you're stung by an Arizona bark scorpion, this is what the reaction might look like. So most commonly, in almost every sting that occurs, there's going to be some localized pain, some tingling, some numbness. The region where you're stung is probably going to spread with pain a little bit. And then a couple of these more dangerous symptoms include difficulty breathing and increased heart rate and blood pressure. So these are the two that you really want to keep an eye on and monitor if you're stung or if you think you've been stung. If these get worse, hospitalization can be required. Muscle twitching may also occur, so that's something to look for if you think that maybe your child has been stung. Erratic eye movements, so if your eyes are jittering back and forth, if you can't look in one spot for very long. And again, with the muscle twitching, that goes along with cramping and restless movements. And then anaphylaxis is possibly the most dangerous symptom. So if you've been stung multiple times by a scorpion, an allergy can develop, and this can send a person into anaphylactic shock, which is why it's really important to keep an eye on the symptoms and get to a hospital if the symptoms persist or if they get worse. So like I said, the most vulnerable populations are going to be young children, anywhere from infants to 9 years old is going to be particularly at risk for these dangerous symptoms if they're stung. Elderly, people with pre-existing respiratory and heart conditions, so going back to that difficulty breathing as well as the increased heart rate, those are going to be very dangerous for someone who is stung by a scorpion. And then again, if you're allergic, that can also be extremely dangerous. So if you're stung, what you want to do, most importantly, is monitor your symptoms, keep an eye on how you or the person who has been stung is feeling, and then contact poison control. So poison control can be really helpful in a case like this. They can talk to you about what symptoms to monitor for, and let you know if and when you should see a hospital or go to the emergency room if symptoms persist. And they may also call back and check up on you just to make sure that symptoms haven't gotten worse. So there is an antivenom out there available for scorpion stings for the Arizona bark scorpion. It's called Anascorp, and it's the first and only FDA-approved antivenom that is available. It's administered through an intravenous injection, so just an IV, and it's used in emergency room settings to reverse the symptoms of bark scorpion stings that are going to be more severe. So again, difficulty breathing, increased heart rate are going to be the main two that this antivenom controls for. Antivenom is typically only used for severe cases, so children, people who are really at risk for these severe symptoms to develop. And that is because it is an extremely expensive hospital trip. So the antivenom itself costs up to $12,000 per vial, and at least 3 vials are typically needed per treatment. So the treatment will start by administering 3 vials to control the symptoms, and then if symptoms persist, 1 vial can be administered each hour. And so you really don't want to have to go to the hospital for a scorpion sting. If possible, if the symptoms are mild, you may be able to stay at home, monitor your symptoms, keep an eye on it, call poison control if needed, and really just make sure that it doesn't get any worse. But if someone is stung, the antivenom is available. And again, typically young children are the ones who are the most at risk for these severe reactions.